On the platform, we sat next to the bushes. The four of us had caught up inside a few minutes earlier, trading updates about our daughters and grandchildren. We chatted like it was any other day. George and Laura gave us the latest news about the health of George's parents, former President H.W. and Barbara, both of whom had been in the hospital recently, but happily were now on the mend. As we sat waiting for the President-elect to arrive, my mind wandered back to that incredible day 24 years earlier when Bill took the oath of the office for the first time. It could not have been easy for George H.W. and Barbara to watch, but they had been extraordinarily gracious to us. The outgoing president left a letter for Bill in the Oval Office. This is one of the most decent and patriotic things I've ever read. Your success now is our country's success. I'm rooting hard for you, he wrote. We did our best to show the same graciousness to George W. and Laura 8 years later. At this moment, I was trying to summon a similar attitude about the incoming president. As I had said in my concession speech, he deserved an open mind and a chance to lead. I also thought about Al Gore, who in 2001 sat stoically through George W.'s inauguration despite having won more votes. 5 members of the Supreme Court decided that election. That must have been awful to bear. I realized I was inventing a new pastime, imagining the pain of the past. John Adams, our second commander-in-chief, suffered the indignity of being the first president ever voted out of office, losing to Thomas Jefferson in 1800. But he had got a measure of revenge 25 years later when his son John Quincy was elected. In 1972, George McGovern lost 49 out of 50 states to Richard Nixon. Bill and I worked hard on McGovern's campaign and have indelible memories of that defeat. And let's not forget William Howard Taft, whom Teddy Roosevelt had groomed to succeed him 4 years later in 1912. Teddy decided Taft wasn't doing a good enough job as president, so he ran as a third-party candidate, split the election, and Woodrow Wilson won. That had to hurt. Then Bill touched my elbow, and I snapped back to the present. The Obamas, Biden, and the Bidens were in front of us. I imagined President Obama riding over in the president limo with a man who had risen to prominence partly by lying about Barack's birthplace and accusing him of not being an American. At some point in the day's proceeding, Michelle and I shared a rueful look. It said, "Can you believe this?" 8 years later, on that bitterly cold day when Barack was sworn in, our heads were full of plans and possibilities. Today was just about putting on a game face and getting through it. The president-elect finally arrived. I had known Donald Trump for years, but never imagined he'd be standing on the steps of the Capitol, taking the oath of office as President of the United States. He was a fixture of the New York scene when I was a senator. Like a lot of big-shot real estate guys in the city, only more flamboyant and self-promoting. In 2005, he invited us to his wedding to Melania in Palm Beach, Florida. We weren't friends, so I assumed he wanted as much star power as he could get. Bill happened to be speaking in the area that weekend, so we decided to go. Why not? I thought it would be fun. Gaudy, over-the-top spectacle. And I was right. I attended the ceremony, then met Bill for the reception at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. We had our photo taken with the bride and groom and left. The next year, Trump joined other prominent New Yorkers in a video spoof prepared for the Legislative Correspondents Association dinner in Albany, which is a state version of the more famous White House Correspondents Association dinner. The idea was that the wax figure of me at Madame Tussauds Museum in Times Square had been stolen, so I had to stand in and pretend to be a statue while various famous people walked by and said things to me. New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg said I was doing a great job as senator. Then I joked about running for president in 2008 as a self-funder. When Trump appeared, he said, "You look really great, unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. The hair is magnificent, the face is beautiful. You know, I really think you'd make a great president." Nobody could come close. The camera pulled back to reveal he wasn't talking to me after all, but to his own wax statue. It was funny at the time. Funnier now. When Trump declared his candidacy for real in 2015, I thought it was another joke, like a lot of people did. By then, he remade himself from tabloid scoundrel into right-wing crank, with his long, offensive, quixotic obsession with President Obama's birth certificate. He'd flirted with politics for decades, but it was hard to take him seriously. He reminded me of one of those old men ranting on about how the country was going to hell in a handbasket unless people started listening to him. It was impossible to ignore Trump. The media gave him free, wall-to-wall coverage. I thought it was important to call him out for his bigotry, which I did early and often, starting when he called Mexican immigrants rapists and drug dealers the day he announced his candidacy. But it wasn't until I saw him dominate a debate with a crowded field of talented Republican candidates, not with brilliant ideals or powerful arguments, but with ugly attacks that drew gasps, that I realized he might be for real. Now here he was, with his hand on the Bible, promising to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. The joke, it turned out, was on us. It started to rain, and people around us fumbled with the thin plastic ponchos we'd been given. Backstage, I had urged Bill to wear his trench coat. The day was unusually warm, and Bill didn't think he needed it. Now he was glad he worn it. A small, wifely victory on a torturous day. As awkward as the ponchos looked, they could have looked worse. I had heard the first batch of white ponchos that arrived could have looked something like KKK hoods from a certain angle, and a sharp-eyed inaugural organizer quickly replaced them. The new president's speech was dark and dystopian. I heard it as a howl straight from the white nationalist gut. Its most memorable line was about American carnage, a startling phrase more suited to a slasher film than an inaugural address. Trump painted a picture of a bitter, broken country I didn't recognize.